So I'm going to go into this backyard and collect the trays out of this condo. It's one of our older condos. It was a good example of what we supply for people's backyards. And this happens to be an older style with the five trays in it. And all five trays actually have got these three channel system in it. The only thing that's annoying about these is that each channel has its own plastic viewing cover on it, so you'll see how much work there is involved in this particular condo. I'll follow up near the end with a 4-channel tray. So anyways, you got to peel off all of the covers off and the old tape, and I'm going to extract all the cocoons out of these trays, and then they get cleaned, and that will be covered in other videos. So this is not cleaning bee cocoons. This video is not on that. I have other videos to do with that. You can look up cleaning bees with using sand in a tube. So that's all covered. But right now I'm just extracting all the cocoons after I've taken off all the tape and the viewing covers. Pointing out that some of these trays can get a little wet and you can get a bit of mold in some of them. This one was outside, full-on rain and all the elements that were thrown at it, and so you get some mold in some of these, and I'm just pointing that out here. And I'm using this little tool to break apart the cells that have mud and pull out all these little brown cocoons, which are all mason bees. Most likely all of these bees are going to be Osmialignaria paprinca. It's a very common species in this area on the west coast of BC. Occasionally get lots of different bee species and wasp. And if you go to my website and just Google up Hutchings bees, you'll see all kinds of other bee species that I get in condos. So I'm going to do that for all of the trays. I'm going to take out all the cocoons, take off all the tape, and I'll just move on to a barn, which is similar but different. This is a big industrial version of it. I prefer these. They're much bigger, you get way more bees, and it's less work involved. But it's all held together with tape. I've got some pretty good tape on this one. A little more expensive, I got it for free. And one thing you got to think about is when you're pulling these apart, press down and slide the trays off so you don't you can scrape off any cocoons that might stick to the lid, keep them in the channel. This top one has a lot of overwintering flies in it. They sneak in here and hang out for the winter, as do a lot of queen yellow jacket wasp. So here's this beautiful vulgaris queen. Now this particular queen, she's going to go on to next year, and she's going to be a foundress queen for a whole new hive somewhere. So I'm just going to take all these out too. Over the edge they go into the yard. They're all live. They're just kind of groggy. They're in a state of diapause. A lot of these insects, like the mason bees themselves. And I start extracting these cocoons. Some get filled right up. Some don't. It all depends on when I put them out. And they just pick and choose where they want to go. See a bit of mold on that one there. Doesn't matter. Everything goes into the sieve. It'll all get cleaned. You can see that one tray acts as a lid to the one below it, and if you just scrape it sideways, you'll keep the cocoons from sticking to the bottom. So you just pull them all out, and I kind of know what I'm doing here. If you're kind of rough, you can hurt them, but I'm I've been doing this a lot, and when you are doing, in these barns, sometimes I'm doing 50 or 60 of them. It's a lot of work, so you kind of get good at it. And you'll notice that some of these have got little orange, powdery, puffy cells. Those are actually mites and their excrement that have eaten all the pollen left over from the female bee that had provided for her young in that one particular cell, and they outcompeted the larvae that was supposed to feed on the pollen, and it died, and the mites took over and ate all that pollen, and they're sitting in their winter ready to come out next spring with the bees. So this is what we're doing this cleaning for, is to get rid of those mites. So you do this outside in cold winter times so that the bees don't think it's spring. If you brought this inside and it was warm, they would start to think it's spring and they would start chewing through the cocoon. So you got to do it outside. So I'm going to do each one of those trays the same way, and when they're all scraped out from the cocoons, now I start brushing out with brushes and sandpaper and scraping tools, whatever you want to use. So a variety of brushes. I like the thinner brushes. I also have a scraping tool to suit flat bottomed and round bottom. Flat bottom we would make with a dado blade on a table saw. We also have a round blade that we use for making channels. You'll see that in the making mason bee condo videos. And this is an older style. It's got the flat back attached to an individual tray that was actually cut from one long length of pine that we would cut all these grooves in, and we just chopped it and then put the piece on the back. I prefer to use the tooth blade, and you'll see in the making video how we do that. Okay, so I'm also going on to some sandpaper here and just scraping through each channel. It doesn't matter if there's a bit of residue, leftover tape. It's not that big a deal. If it's your own and you've got one of these to do, go for it. But when you're doing lots, I don't get too picky on it. So I've taken all these plastic covers, I've washed them, and they're all washed and dried. And I've got these trays clean, so now the covers are going to be taped down. I've got two types of tape. Well, it's masking tape, but I've got a 3/4 inch masking tape and I got a 1/2 inch masking tape. So I start with a 3/4 inch masking tape, and I rip it at a length that's just shy of the entire length of the tray, and I make it short by about 1/2 inch so that I don't have to have it sticking out over the ends. And I lay it down, hold the plastic viewing cover down with my fingers, put the tape on, make sure the tape does not go over the channel so you can actually see the bees within the channel. You don't want to cover right over them. You want to. This is why you're doing this, is so that you can look in and see how the bees are. It's kind of fun to look at the live bees inside coming and going. You can photograph them or document how many females are in which channel and how many eggs she's laying. It's kind of fun. So you put the tape down along the edge. It doesn't stick out over the ends. Now the middle one. Middle one you put down with 1/2 inch tape, and the 1/2 inch tape you actually put it along its length to cover both of the viewing covers. I'm holding it in place here, putting it down. I'm not covering over the channel. You want to view inside, and it's the same deal. It's short of the ends. Squishing it down. It keeps the mites from laterally going from channel to channel should you have any mites. If you do get one in the center, it could spread out to the channels on either side. That's the advantage of having a 3-channel tray. But it's a lot of extra work. And then you finish off with a 3/4 inch tape and wrap it around the ends, and it also holds all the tape in along the edges. Some people use paper tubes, and I don't know if I should comment on that, but take your pick what you want to do. The paper tubes, you have to pay for them every year. They're also limited in their length. This happens to be 8-inch trays. I've made them up to 12 inches. 11 inches the most efficient from my research at university, and I stick mostly to at least 8-inch up to around 11 inches. So there's all the trays on, and I'm just going to do one more example of that taping, what I was doing there. I've done the edges, now I'm doing the middle one. It's kind of interesting to have viewing covers so you can actually see the bees inside. And I encourage people to pull their trays out so they can actually see the bees. As long as you put them back in the same order, that's why they're numbered. You have to put the trays back in the same place because the bees don't read the numbers. They go by their position in the whole scheme of the trays. So they might go to the top tray and then go to the one on the left or whatever. So if you mixed up that whole level, they wouldn't know what's going on. Okay, so there's all the trays from the condo done, and move on to the barns, which is very similar to just a bigger version of it, and they don't have any covers on top of them. So it's the same deal. You're gonna wire brush them, you're gonna sand them, you're gonna scrape them, and these trays also use the bottom of its top tray becomes the lid for the tray below. You'll see when you look upside down on the bottom side here. Okay, well anyways, you scrape. I'm using a scraping tool as well. That happens to be a round bottomed channel, so I'm using a curved round tool to scrape all the channels. Yeah, on the bottom you get a little bit of residue. You can sand it off. What's really interesting is I've put up used condos right beside brand new clean condos, and the bees prefer to go to used condos. The smell of bees seem to attract more bees. So this was a new condo this year, last year now, and now that it's been used once, the bees will readily go to it next year. So you can see that the top tray becomes the lid for the tray below it, and of course the top lid is just a lid. There's no channels in it. I use the round part of the channel goes to the bottom and the flat is at the top. That's how I do mine. So now I'm going to clamp these all together. Carrying on clamping here. And now if I had more time, I would have gotten a mallet out, a wooden mallet, just to square up these channels a bit more. It's not really critical, just sometimes you want to do a nicer job on your edges, but I'm doing it pretty quick here for the video. This tape I've got is just inexpensive parcel tape. It's really tough. The only thing is if it's got any nicks in it, it'll break. So same deal, tape the whole thing around. Do it about 3-4 times around. If you nick this tape, like when you're going around an edge and you happen to catch a sharp spot, it will break on you, so you just want to not do that. You can't do this with masking tape. Masking tape won't hold the strength really, unless you did it like 20 times, but this stuff is way tougher. And when you go to cut it off, you better keep that edge live, or else it'll flip back down on the roll and you'll never find it again. So I have a little corner I fold in. It's tough when you're trying to find the edge and you haven't got your glasses on, so squeeze it on pretty tight, then flip the whole works over and take your clamp off. And the same thing, put your get your tape out, tape the whole back side of this series of trays together. And you can take off your final clamps and you're ready to put this inside of its little holding box. So round sides down, flat sides up, goes in the little housing box, and it holds it on an angle so that with gravity it all falls down and you get the gaps formed at the tops, and those gaps should be wide enough that bees won't want to take residence in there. If it's too close, bees will go in there and actually start to lay cells, and it's really frustrating because you can't pull this thing out. There's jammed full of bees in there. She'll be laying her mud, bringing in pollen, laying her eggs, and she just does cell after cell after cell, and you can't pull it out. So you gotta have a bit of a gap in there, about 3/4 of an inch, half an inch, somewhere in there. 3/8 still go in there. You can go to my website and you'll see pictures of what bees will do in a gap. I got these open flat trays with full of bees in them. Gaps on the backs to keep bees also from trying to use those sides as a channel. You can also do holes at the bottom. This whole thing is going to be placed in a shelter, so this will not be exposed to direct rain or sun. So in comparison to the 3-channel trays, I'm going to show a 4-channel tray, and these just take one single piece of viewing clear cover on it. So whereas the 3 had individual ones on each channel, this one's got one piece on all 4 channels. Same thing applies. You've got tape on the sides and over the ends. It's quicker to do these. The only drawback is if you got mites in one channel, they could spread sideways to the adjacent channels. But of course it's more work to do the 3 channel with individual viewing pieces, but they're a little bit better for keeping mites out. Okay, thank you.